The sound of crying echoed down the hospital corridor long before anyone understood what was happening. It wasn't the ordinary cry of pain or sorrow, it was raw, desperate, filled with a kind of heartbreak that made the entire ward fall silent. Nurses froze mid-step. A patient in a wheelchair stopped moving. Even the air seemed to thicken, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. A heavily pregnant woman stumbled backward, her hands clutching her stomach as tears streamed down her face. Her name was Sienna Hol, and she was only moments away from giving birth. But before she could even call for help, another woman, a vision of fury in a royal blue dress, grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked hard enough to make her cry out. "Don't you dare pretend you're the victim." The woman screamed, her voice slicing through the sterile air. Her name was Mara Steele, and she was not here for forgiveness. She was here for revenge. The corridor descended into chaos. Nurses shouted for security, a tray clattered to the floor, and still, Mara's fury raged unchecked. Sienna's legs buckled beneath her weight, and her breathing grew ragged. She wasn't just in pain, she was terrified. Because the woman attacking her wasn't a stranger. She was the mistress of her husband. To the bystanders, it might have looked like a scandalous love triangle gone wrong. But to Sienna, it was the collapse of everything she had ever believed in. For years, she had lived quietly, loving deeply, forgiving easily. She had grown up without much, no grand inheritance, no name that opened doors. Just a small home, a mother who worked too hard, and a father who had vanished before she could even remember his face. Her mother had told her he was weak, irresponsible, unworthy of love. So Sienna grew up determined to be strong, to make her own peace. And then she met Jordan, a man with charm, ambition, and promises that felt like forever. They built a life together, or at least, she thought they did. But wealth has a way of revealing hearts, and somewhere between late-night meetings and whispered phone calls, Jordan became someone she no longer recognized. The signs were there. The perfume that wasn't hers, the excuses that didn't fit, the smile that no longer reached his eyes. When she finally discovered the truth, that he was having an affair with Mara Steele, a powerful executive whose beauty could make men weak, her world cracked open. Mara had everything Sienna didn't: confidence, glamour, a hunger for power. But what she didn't have was peace. She couldn't stand being second to anyone, especially not to a quiet woman like Sienna. So when Sienna, heavy with child and broken-hearted, checked herself into a private hospital to await her baby's arrival, Mara decided that would be the day to destroy her completely. That afternoon, sunlight spilled through the hospital's glass doors as Sienna sat quietly, one hand on her stomach, whispering gentle promises to the life inside her. "You're safe," she murmured. "Mom is here." But that promise shattered when Mara stormed in. Her heels clapped sharply against the tiles, her eyes wild with jealousy. Without a word of warning, she lunged, grabbing Sienna's hair and screaming accusations of weakness and manipulation. "You think that baby will keep him? You think you're enough for him?" She spat, shaking Sienna violently. Sienna cried out, the pain radiating through her body like fire. Nurses rushed forward, shouting for help, but before anyone could separate them, a deep voice broke through the chaos. "Enough." The single word froze the entire corridor. It came from a tall, silver-haired man in a long dark overcoat, his expression unreadable but his presence commanding. The hospital staff fell silent. Even the air seemed to shift. He stepped forward, his eyes locking on the trembling woman on the floor. His face softened instantly. The nurses recognized him before anyone else did. It was Arthur Vaughan, a man whose name carried power, whose reputation could silence rooms, whose business empire touched every corner of the city. But at that moment, his wealth didn't matter. What mattered was the woman crying in front of him. Because she wasn't a stranger to him. She was his daughter. Arthur had spent years searching for the child he lost after a bitter divorce. Years haunted by regret, believing he had failed her forever. And now, here she was, pregnant, frightened, and being attacked. His daughter, the one he had missed every birthday, every heartbreak, every moment of her life. Arthur moved forward slowly, kneeling beside Sienna. "It's all right," he said softly, his voice trembling. "You're safe now." Then he stood and turned to Mara. His eyes were no longer soft. They were sharp, deadly calm. "No one touches my family again," he said. The room went still. The nurses lowered their heads. The hospital director appeared from his office, pale with recognition. Even Mara faltered, confusion flickering across her face. "Your family," she sneered, trying to recover her arrogance. This pathetic woman, But as she glanced around and saw the reverence, the sudden flurry of calls, the bowing heads, her confidence began to crack. Arthur nodded once to his assistant, who was already on the phone. Within minutes, security and police arrived. Cameras flashed outside as the story spread like wildfire. Mara's name, once celebrated in business circles, was now being dragged through headlines for assaulting the daughter of one of the city's most powerful men. Jordan arrived soon after, his face pale, panic written in every line. He tried to approach Sienna, but Arthur stepped between them, his glare cold enough to stop him in place. "You've done enough," he said simply. As doctors rushed Sienna to the delivery room, Arthur held her hand. "I'll be right here, sweetheart," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore." That night, rain poured outside as thunder rolled in the distance. Inside, the cries of a newborn echoed softly, a baby boy, healthy and strong. Sienna cradled him in her arms, her heart swelling with love and relief. When Arthur entered the room, he stood quietly by the doorway, watching the daughter he'd finally found holding the grandson he'd never dared to dream of. She looked up, her voice fragile. "Who are you?" He smiled through tears. "Someone who should never have left. Someone who's proud of you, Sienna." Recognition flickered in her eyes. The resemblance, the warmth, the truth she'd never known. And as tears fell down her cheeks, she realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. Weeks later, the world knew the story. Mara Steele's empire collapsed. Jordan's career was over. But Sienna, she rose quietly, not through power, but through grace. Arthur gave her a home surrounded by gardens, a life of peace, and the one thing she'd been denied all her life, a family that stayed. Every night, as her son slept peacefully in her arms, she would whisper, "You are loved. You are safe. You will never know the pain I did." If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. These stories remind us that no matter how dark life gets, love has a way of finding its way home again. Before you go, tell us in the comments, do you believe forgiveness can truly heal even the deepest wounds? Because sometimes, the softest hearts carry the strongest light.